Okay, all right. So we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are super excited to have you all with us. I'm your host, Hasti, and as a part of our Build Your Career in Salesforce series today, we have a wonderful guest with us who is going to be talking about Salesforce Solution Architect. So, before we get started, I will share a few quick tips for the smooth functioning of the session. This session will be recorded so you can revisit our YouTube channel at your ease. If you're facing any issues like difficulty loading the session, click on the event link and refresh the page. If you are unable to view the live broadcast on LinkedIn, we recommend visiting our YouTube channel and Twitter handle, as it is being broadcasted on these two social media platforms alongside LinkedIn. So today's agenda is going to be brief about solution architect, roles and responsibilities of solution architect, step-by-step process of a project from beginning to end, technical and non-technical skills needed to become a solution architect, pro tips from our expert for passing the certification exam, and types of question asked in solution architect interviews. Our today's speaker has an exceptional knowledge of operations, data migration, security, and Salesforce architecture. Not only that, she has shown the ability to develop and execute technical projects as well as manage technical teams from needs analysis through completion. All right, so without any further ado, let's welcome our guest. Today we have Maria Huemmer with us. Maria is a mother of three, 14x Salesforce certified, and a solution architect at Salesforce. Hi, Maria. Welcome to the live. Thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great, and it's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it is an honor to have you. So, Maria, please tell us a little bit about your journey and how did you get started to reach where you are today?
Yeah, I love to talk about this journey, especially when it's in the context of a career in Salesforce, because I don't think anybody has a identical career in Salesforce to anybody else. So I'll
Yeah.
say my path started. I'm a liberal arts major from the
Wow.
University of Texas, so I'm here in Austin, Texas, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, and so I picked this degree because I didn't have to pick anything to specialize in. So it's so obscure a degree. I don't even have something like English or history to tie it to. And I spent the first 5 years of my career as a communications director for a nonprofit here. And
Oh,
after
wow.
some time, I just I said, hey, let me look around, let me see what else is there. And my mom is actually a Salesforce developer, and
Oh,
so
wow.
she kind of said, hey, you should look at some of these tech companies. And this was Austin right before the tech boom, so it was a great time to be here. So I actually applied and got into a role as a technical support ninja, is what they called it, but basically someone providing technical support at a call center. So I went from a college degree communication director of 5 years to an entry level technical support job, which for
Oh,
some
wow.
did not look like a great move. But for me, what was really nice is I was getting into the tech space. I was getting to work with new people who worked in a different way, a lot faster, and I was learning more about what it meant to run operations in a company as first a part of the person at the company. So I actually was at this company when we underwent a Service Cloud implementation. So we weren't on Salesforce. We moved to Salesforce, and I remember just thinking, "Oh, I've heard of Salesforce. My mom does something with Salesforce, you know." And so as the company grew, which startups tend to do, they needed more roles to support the team, and we had a traditional sales admin who was doing, what she could do with the velocity you'd expect from a nonprofit, but it started to be clear that we needed someone to also be able to focus on Service Cloud. And so I stepped up, I took that role. The admin took a new role, so all of a sudden I found myself as the solo admin in an org that had Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, a number of add-on packages, and we also had HubSpot integrated, and we were looking at integrating Marketo. So
Oh,
there was a
wow.
lot going on. There's a phrase, drinking from the water hose. I was drinking from the water hose, but I really enjoyed it. And what was really fun is I didn't have to stick to one cloud. I could just wake up and say, I'm tired of working on Service Cloud today. I'm going to work on marketing and kind of prioritize my work. And I also got to learn a lot about things about the business. So how I get to sit in meetings with executives and understand how they prioritized and how they made sure that their teams were working on the right level, right? Something I would have never had access to as an entry level person. I had access to research apps and research products, which you think, if you've been an admin for a while, that's a normal part of your work. But as somebody who's new to work, that's a real offering you can provide is, say, yeah, I know there's 70 apps on the App Exchange for that. Let me do your homework for you and figure out what's right and, install it in a test org and see what makes sense. So I got a lot of hands-on experience. The team there grew. So we did have a Salesforce developer. There's a lot of turnaround too. And at the time that I left, we had a good team. We had about 4 people on the Salesforce team. And we had aligned ourselves from kind of sales and support and marketing. We moved briefly underneath financial, which was an interesting org structure. And then we landed in engineering. And I only say that to say, what I really liked about being part of the engineering team is we got the rigor that you would expect out of engineers. And I don't think admins always get that. Before that, I would get a Google chat saying, hey, can you add this field, right? With no sense of priority or why or what. You'd get something in Slack, or you might get a ticket and it would come in critical. And you go, okay, is production down? No. Why is this critical, right? And so if you're not at a place where you are getting your requests in a sustainable way through some kind of ticketing system, whether it's Jira or something you've built in Salesforce, I'd really recommend it, because you want to have a way to prioritize, to show value, to be able to pivot and say, oh, something important popped up, so these low requests, they're no longer important. And I think that'll also help you have good work-life balance for you and your teams, because there's always going to be more work, right? But if you know you're working on the right thing and you're communicating, this is what I'm working on. If people don't agree, that's a business prioritization meeting that you don't need to put yourself into, right? And I think that was really important for me, as I really cut my teeth on how to plan, how to execute projects, how to prioritize. And I got to sit as a fly on the wall in these meetings where I'd hear prioritization from our executives. What was important to them? How would the support leader justify saving, a minute a call versus sales wanting to increase revenue, which, is an art sometimes to try to win when you've got a 4-person team and only so much work they can do. So I did that for a long time. And then I decided I wanted to try something new. I became a mom and I had the opportunity to move into consulting. And normally you'd think, why would you do that? You're a new mom. Why would you move into consulting? But for me, the opportunity was the ability to focus on Salesforce, to learn from other people in the field. And also, this was my first opportunity to work remotely. And so this was before the pandemic. This was before remote work was common. And I was firsthand experiencing the joys of having to leave the office right at time to be able to pick up your kid from daycare and make it home before traffic started, right? And I only say this again because these are pain points for real people. We are all real people, perhaps with families, definitely with our own goals. And it's important when you go, what do I want out of my career? And what do I want out of my employer, to make sure that you align. And for me, when I made that choice, my employer supported me through maternity leave. It was great, but there was no option to stay remote, right? And so when the opportunity came for me to do that, I just knew this is going to help me be a better person, a better mother. So that was the jump for me. And the company committed to only 4 days of travel a month. So for me, that was great. So I did that for about 5 years and learned a lot about different clouds. I built up my certifications, which for me really just meant I went after things I was interested in. So the entire stack under application architect, I was really interested in. User experience was one of my latest. I really liked the idea of being able to focus on user experience, especially since I come from being an end user, like I've talked to you about. And so I've sat in, I don't know how many meetings where the business proposes, 20 mandatory fields. And I just sit there and go, nobody's going to want to do 20 mandatory fields. So, being able to resonate with your users is really important. And that's not a technical, not as technical of an exam. So if you're looking for exam stuff, that might be my first exam comment is take a look at the user experience. But anyway, so I got to a point where I was really doing what I wanted to do. Life was really good. And for me, the move to Salesforce was to really dive in deep and be able to be part of huge teams, right? And people who are super smart about the Salesforce product and be able to learn from them and kind of incubate for a while. I've done a lot. I have 3 kids. They're all, still little and starting school. And so to give me a chance to step away from the reality of delivery at a partner, which is, constant, and invite to myself a chance to reflect on what I want to do next. And, y'all have probably all heard of the idea of Ohana, but Salesforce is really serious about work-life balance. So I'm taking some time for work-life balance. We're hoping to adopt another child. I say that for anyone, again, don't be afraid to continue with your family plans. Don't put your career on hold to come into Salesforce. But that was a key attribute for me is they have a great maternity leave policy. Everybody is super excited. So if you're looking for a role and these are important things, don't be shy about bringing them up. You might not bring them up directly in your recruiting calls, but look for companies who advertise they're a great place to work. They're a great place for women to work. They're a great place for families to work. These are all things that companies will tout if they've earned them. And if they don't tout them, you can always ask in your interview, hey, could I speak to somebody who's a mom, somebody who's a dad, to get an understanding of it. One of my interview people that interviewed me was a woman who was going on maternity leave in a couple of months. And she brought it up with me when I mentioned my kids. And she talked about how well supported she was and how excited she was to be going on leave and how her education, Salesforce provides education support, was going to continue during that time. So, if you have questions about that, don't be afraid to ask and don't settle, keep yourself your priority as well. So I'm now at Salesforce. What I've discovered along the path to Salesforce is I think every person in every company is going to give you a different definition of what it means to be a solution architect. And so I prepared a list of things that could be true, and then some things I heard that probably aren't true, but there's no definitive list. So I'd say, yeah, if that's okay, I'll segue. So for solo admins, you really do everything. And so if you're looking at a company and they're hiring for a solution architect, you might ask like, hey, what's the team composition at your company? Or what are you looking to fill? If they don't already have a BA, if they already don't have someone that manages the backlog, if they don't have a junior admin, they don't have a developer, then you're going to do all of those things, right? You're going to have to. And the developer, if you're not a coder, figure out, hey, do they have partnerships or do they understand that they need to hire a developer or be open to partnerships, but keep that in mind. But at mature companies, what I've seen is, so there's we work hand in hand with what's called the project management team or project management organization, which is sometimes abbreviated as PMO. So they typically will work with the business and the stakeholders to figure out what's important, what needs to be worked on. And as part of those high level discussions, there might be an analyst or somebody who's saying, okay, here's what's going on. And as part of the discovery, or even earlier, but definitely discovery, it'll come up, oh, these people that we're designing for work in Salesforce. So we need someone from Salesforce to help us with design and delivery. So that might be where you're brought in. It might be a luxury for you to have PMO. You might be PMO. So I'm just saying that because depending on how your company is set up, that could vary. So once that work has been identified, there's a process of developing what are called requirements and user stories. So user stories and requirements tell you, what am I building? What's the problem I'm trying to solve? What's the scope, right? So I love scope. That's the first thing I try to establish when I do work. So I can pull the not in scope card. And the user experience badge or the certification I talked about in the trail guide for it, to study for it, there's several trailheads that touch on these topics. So if these are new things to you, the idea of user stories, requirements, acceptance criteria, I highly recommend reading them, even if your company doesn't use them, because you can start using these methods in how you work. And ultimately, it helps you keep your work on track and in its proper rails so that you can go home at the end of the day with peace of mind saying, I'm delivering on what I'm supposed to be, even if I have to create that structure and those rails for myself. It took me, if I, my path, which is why I share it with you, is it took me going from the wild west of Google Chats and adding fields in production to to Salesforce, going in this pattern. And so I'm a believer in why it matters to have structure, to do good discovery. There's a phrase like measure twice, cut once, right? I'm like, man, I have my business stakeholders really read their feature sets and go, okay, is there anything we missed? Because this is what we're delivering. No one gets to add more without, some kind of analysis once we start build. So solution architects will help take those requirements and build a design. I see some overlap between solution architecture and technical architecture sometimes. So some companies, like I know I've been recruited for technical architect roles. I used to always think, well, a TA's got to be a developer. So that's what that means. And that's not true. So the idea with technical architecture is you're looking across perhaps applications. So Salesforce is one of many in a landscape. You're looking at integration patterns between them, and you're looking at things. Maybe some of them are developer like, but things like performance testing and network security and stuff like that. So if you're solely within Salesforce, you typically don't have to. You're not assuming. That there's going to be a latency requirement that you need to build for. It's like, well, if Salesforce is up, my requirements are working. The end. Okay, there might be some performance stuff, but like you're not sitting there going, should I cache this or put it on the payload? None of that mess. So for me, what I learned early on is, clearly I like to talk and can talk a lot. And so one of my strengths is talking, understanding, communicating, writing. So when I looked at technical architect versus solution architect, because that was a choice, right? With coming to Salesforce, I could have taken a technical architect role, or I could have earned the technical architecture, certifications, and then tried to come in as that. But for me, I said, that's great. I'm glad people really like to do that technical stuff. But I think for me, the fun is solutioning, working with the business, and also getting that first draft of the design and kind of gut checking with other solution architects. Like, hey, what's good about this? Should we go with a custom object or a standard object? Let's debate, stuff like that. And I just recently did a presentation for the automation hour if you're interested on using tasks with some custom stuff. So take a look, and I'd be happy to hear any feedback on it with regard to how we go. Yeah. One thing about solution architects that I say in that's still true is I feel like there's rarely a right way to design something in Salesforce. There are clear wrong ways to design things, but when it comes to what's the right thing to do, and I point this out in that deck, which is why I'd like to call it out here, is even Salesforce's own architecture guide on automation, for example, will say, well, here's our general standard, but you need to look at your team's capabilities. If you have no admins and only developers, that might actually change what you deliver, right? Same with the reverse, of course. And then also, things like velocity or partners, things like that could impact how you build. What's already set up in your org? Do you have another org you're linking to? Those types of things. So all of this is stuff that a solution architect should have some idea of. You should be someone who can get requirements, who can design a solution, who can weigh the pros and cons. Hopefully you're open to presenting that design and getting feedback on it. And if you don't have another person at your company who can do it, find people where you can just, gut check with them. Hey, I'm thinking about doing this. What do people think? And build your own community if you have to, because that's how I've learned best and safest. Because I'd rather learn that way than figure out in production that something didn't work, or figure out in, QA that something we thought could work would not work. So it's always nice to have that type of stuff on paper. So then the solution architect, depending on where you're at, you might hand off your design to a technical crew team that's going to build. You might be building it yourself. So it depends. I would like to think any solution architect will always build in a development environment. You know better than to build in production. Okay. So you're going to do some development. You're going to do some QA work. I always QA as my end users. So sometimes you might have to do some homework to figure out, are they already in Salesforce? If so, how do I set up somebody or log in as somebody to figure that out? If they're not in Salesforce, that's a whole exercise of determining what level of permission they need, right? and the principal typically is give them the least amount of stuff that they need access to. You've got to do that. And then you might also be responsible for packaging your changes and pushing them to production. Some companies I work with, they have a completely separate DevOps, cycle or process where you just check in your stuff and you're done. But again, it's going to depend on the company you're at. And I'd say if you like to be hands-on, you need to look for that when you look for roles and make sure that you're comfortable with what's happening. I know for me, it was very strange the first couple of times that stuff I designed, I didn't have to build it. And then it just made it to production one day. And really, besides a couple of questions, nobody asked me anything. So if you'd like to keep hands-on, I know for me, what I do is every new release, I like to get into a dev org. You can spin one up every release and just play around with some of the new functionality. So for core, which would be Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, Community Cloud, I do CPQ a little, not a lot. It's just I like to go in there and just make sure I know what stuff looks like. So if I were to see something in a demo, I could say, is this custom development or is this on platform? But if you want to keep your feet wet, just playing around with the new functionality, doing trailheads, doing the super badges, that's a good way to do it too. But make sure that you're up to date, because the solution architect is not someone who's going to be in and out. You're not going to be someone solving production issues, talking to end users. I've seen sometimes we're responsible for building training documentation. I personally try to stay out of that and keep that to trainers. And the reason I say that is I think it does a disservice to people who are actually trained in training to assume that someone who knows how to build a system is an educator or a communicator to end users, right? And so I know for me, there's a certain level of like, if you don't know to click on something that has a line under it, I'm not really gonna build a training guide and say, click on this thing, and if it has an underline, you can click on it. So just know your strengths, know what you want to work on, and be willing to ask for help, or at least say, you can call it out as a risk. I'm someone who's very open to raising flags and risks and say, there's a risk here. I am not a trainer and you're asking me to build training stuff. So just to let you know, if there's a way we can mitigate, let's go. So be open about that kind of thing too. So that's kind of the high levels about the roles and responsibilities. So I put a project outline here. I'll just go through. So I'm going to go through the project outline and what you might typically expect. So kickoff, you might be on site for that just to say hi. Okay. Discovery, you may not be involved. You might be involved. Just depends how quickly they want to get your design. For requirements gathering and then design, that's when you'll typically shine. So you're figuring out what are the requirements and how do I build for them. You might be poking under the hood in the org if it already exists to see what's already built. You might be talking to the architects at the company if you're a consultant, or looking at your documentation if you have it, or looking in your org and making sure everything looks good. And then you'll be building that design, hopefully vetting it with another architect, and then passing it on. You might do development from there, testing, push to production, but those are not key factors that I see in the solution architect role. And then again, the big change I see is you might find that you're not touching production very often. So to me, that's a key that you're getting out of like a senior consultant role or a junior admin type role, and more into a strategic when another team or another person is handling the day-to-day production stuff.
Okay. Yeah, you want to go on?
Oh, sure. I didn't know, is there a forum for questions? If so, I was going to pause and see if anyone has questions. Okay.
Yes, I was actually waiting. So first off, kudos to you. I mean, after hearing your journey, I'm really impressed and motivated, because coming from liberal arts to Salesforce and becoming a solution architect and overlooking and solving such complex problems on a day-to-day basis is a huge accomplishment. And that's actually, I mean, it's amazing to see, you're out there doing everything with work-life balance. And so it's amazing to see, and Salesforce is an extremely supportive community, like you said. And then going back to your roles and responsibilities and how things pan out in actual business setup. I think yeah, I mean, like you explained that you are more inclined towards solution architect rather than technical architect is because you like brainstorming and strategizing various challenges that are being faced. So yes, so before we move to the next question, if you have any questions for Maria, please post them in the comment section below and we will make sure to address them at the end of the live and give Maria a shout out in the comment section as to where you're belonging. Um, so, Maria, we already discussed about brief about Salesforce solution architect and a little difference between technical architect and solution architect and the roles and responsibilities. I would like to know, and we would like to know, in fact, what does a typical day in your life look like? Like, what do your day from the end, beginning of the day to the end?
Good question. So I'll just caveat with I'm on my first project at Salesforce, and projects vary. So you ask for Salesforce Solution Architect, you'll get 4 different solutions. But I'll share. I would love to answer that. So for me, my day starts bright and early with my kids, and I'm going to start there because of the work-life balance. I get up, I might check my phone to see if I have emails, usually not. I never have something before I'm back from drop off. And so just some people are not that way. You might wake up with a break fix. I will never wake up with a break fix because I don't support production. So just again, if you're looking for why to be a solution architect, I try to really keep my bullet points here real for you guys. So if you're looking on where to go, that's a big one. I have breakfast with my kids, take them to school. I'm the school bus, so I drop them all off. I get to spend time. Say hi to their teachers. This is something I never thought, again, as a liberal arts major, at a time when we all would have to be going into an office, right? That I would be able to do this, to spend this time. I get back. If I don't have an AM meeting, which usually I don't, just depends. I'm Central Time right now, and my client's East Coast. So just depending on, Salesforce does try to align you with your time zone. So the worst I've ever had was Pacific, which meant I could sleep in. But you know what I mean? They don't try to make it too crazy for you. But if I don't have an early morning, I have a treadmill in my home, so I'll go exercise and I'll catch up on Slack. Like we have obviously we use Slack. And there's a lot of channels that are kind of either fun or motivational or educational. And I keep them in a little Slack section. And so while I'm on the treadmill, it's like my continuing development on the treadmill. I'll look what people said. I save them, if it's a post and I'm like, oh, that was an interesting presentation, I'm going to catch the recording. I'll save it and then I can watch it there. And then I might listen to a book. Like there's a lot of our VTO, if you haven't heard, so that's volunteering time off. We get 56 hours of volunteering time off at Salesforce. And you can pick what groups you're interested in. There's a lot of what we call equality groups. So there's groups to promote women, groups to promote underrepresented minorities, groups if you are religious called Faith Force. So any faith that you have or don't have, there's one for non-believers. And so you can get plugged in with those. And so I want you to note, I haven't actually done any Salesforce work yet, but this is my day so far. So they really push this Ohana work-life balance. And so for me, I spent some time doing that. When I'm done doing that, or whenever my first call is coming up, I do keep a list of what I need to accomplish every day, and I kind of wrap it up at the end of the day. So that's the thing. That's how I can have a relaxing morning. Is I know what's happening in the morning already. I know what the meetings are. There's not a ton of meetings, so I have that. So I'll jump off, get my coffee. I work from home, so I get started on my list. For me, there's a combination of work for my client and also work that I'm doing on Salesforce. So they really recommend that we're involved in initiatives, or, I wouldn't say just recommend. It's fun. It's fun to work with your colleagues, especially when you're remote. So I prioritize those. For me, customer work's always first. But what I've noticed in our work in professional services is it really depends on the timing. What those deliverables look like. I came from a place where we would start a project with a idea of when the end date, like a hard end date. Some of our clients, it's more continuing work and guidance. And so there's not it's like working at a company normally, I would say, where you're not just on for a certain amount of time and then you're off. So, check email, set up some meetings, put together deliverables. My work as a solution architect right now, every company does those solution architect or BA deliverables differently. So, you might have to figure out, am I in Jira? Am I in Confluence? What am I working in? So I keep an eye on those, work on them. A lot of my work is meetings to do discovery and help with design. And at our company, it can depend, like you might be responsible for design and delivery. You might be working with a Salesforce partner. So the client may have a partner, or you might be working with the client's team. It really just depends how the client's set up. And what's cool on our end is you can pick. So as a service resource, I was asked, hey, there's a project. Here's what the work would be like. Is this something you're interested in? Which, coming from a partner, was interesting because, I mean, of course you could always say, no, I don't know, but typically that's what you're resourced for. You're going to go beyond that project. So Salesforce is large enough that you have some time. I've experienced that you have some choice with what you're working on, which is really nice. So do that work. Balance with my Salesforce work. I've got a list of extracurriculars I'm working on. I mentioned at the beginning of the call, that I'm not looking to become more technical. I'm starting to branch out on management. So I would like to work towards becoming a leader. And it's taken me 10 years of saying I don't want to be a leader to get here, just because I knew, to me, working with software, you might push something that sucks. But to be a leader, you're talking about people, not software. And these are real humans who have, you're making an impact on them. And I wanted to make sure I was prepared before I came in and had some kind of impact on real humans. And becoming a mother helped me realize, like, we all do that if we're mothers. We impact humans every day. And so a lot of the skills I've learned as a parent, I learned, oh, this is what good leaders do too. This is great. I might as well learn them both. So in my spare time, Salesforce offers an education credit. So I'm working on some higher education courses in management. And so I might do that for a while, might go do some trailheads, there's a lot of, for us, internal resources we can learn on new tools. And there's always demos that are being done, even though I'm not on the sales team. They produce sales engineering demos. So I can go see what the sales engineering team is learning. I can go see what the product management team is pushing for whatever product. One product I really would like to learn more about is MuleSoft. I haven't done a lot with it as an integration tool. And so, if I decide, hey, I'd like to do that trail, or I'd like to do the Slack trail and see what it looks like to set up Slack. Those are all things that we're encouraged to do, because as we grow our skill set, we can then include that on our resourcing so that if a project comes up, we can say we have it. So there's quite a bit of flexibility on the day-to-day. I won't say everybody's that way. Some people are at capacity on their projects and may not have as much time. But I will say leadership has been very focused on making sure we have balance, to the point where every call I'm on, and we get a lot, not a lot of calls, but we have a lot of calls with leadership, which I think is a good thing, because they care. It shows they care, where they will say, if you're not okay, you need to talk to your manager. We need to make you okay, which is not something, I hope all of you have that support, but I'm not sure if everybody does. And I'm not sure if you hear it, even if you believe it. And so it just goes to show how proactive they are. So if you're looking or you're not looking, feel like you can speak up for yourself, because in our industry, I guess the norm may not be there, but stellar companies, Salesforce being one of them, are starting to make sure that you're taken care of. And if you don't feel taken care of where you are, I would say find a place where you're taken care of, So that's kind of a day-to-day hodgepodge of work that I do. Then I leave in the middle of the day. I like to point this out, to go pick up my kid that's done with school. I say that because, again, never thought I would just do it. Nobody cares. You just block your time. Don't do meetings. Go do that. Do some more work when he gets home, and then pick up my other kids, and we're done. So I've never had to have a call after hours since working at Salesforce. There is no expectation I check email or Slack when I'm off hours. I've never, I have a company phone. I don't think I've got a real phone call on that company phone since I started at Salesforce. So, it took a lot of hard work to get here. But I'd say if you're looking for motivation, for me, I had my goals of I want to be balanced so that I can be the mom and the wife and the person I want to be. And this role, solution architect, looked like it would do that for me. Like, DevOps would have been fun, but you would be dealing with production release stuff. So you got to weigh in these particular details on what do you want to do and what are the time constraints or urgency constraints that you might have when you're scoping out, well, what makes sense for you. And so for me, leadership is the next step because it's going to help me be a better person, a better mom. But I can then take that, skill set to the next level of any team that's doing delivery that requires management could use those skills. So it even takes me above needing to have a Salesforce specific job if I wanted to move somewhere in the company where it was a different type of role. So, you're the architect of your path. So you need to know what's my roadmap, what features am I going to work on, and what might stay in the backlog or get off because they're no longer important. I wanted to learn Apex, I don't know, 7 years ago. And then Flow came out and I was like, nah, I'm never going to have to learn Apex. You know what I mean? There's still a place for it, but in the scope of requirements, it's very, there's a whole lot you can do. And there's a ton of developers for the rest. So, things have really changed. And I'd say focus on what you're good at and what you're passionate about. Then it won't feel like work for you, when you're doing it.
Yes, definitely. And I must say, when you said, it's like a hodgepodge, I feel your day is completely sorted into different compartments, and you exactly know what you want, what you don't want, and that's the best part. And when you have a company supporting your goals and your vision, I think individual can only flourish in that kind of an environment and become the best version of themselves. So I'm really impressed. I mean, you're going after your extracurricular activities, you're going after trailheads and learning new skills and balancing work and life. It's not an easy thing, but you're balancing it like a pro, and I'm super charged by listening to you.
Yep, you could do it. You just several years ago with my husband, after I learned about what product managers do with identifying features and building a roadmap. So this is my first job. I just told my husband we should have a roadmap. What are our what are our key deliverables and what are the things we need to do? So I actually have like an electronic document that has our pillars and imagine a backlog, and we prioritize this is what we're going to work on. So for a long time we prioritized my career in getting certifications, and so that meant he picked up the kids and I traveled. I told you about the role where I traveled to build up that level of experience. But the benefit now is I was able to get the role. This was the role, so that as my kids are no longer babies, they're a little older, I was positioned in a place where I could do this. So it's not going to happen overnight. But I'd say, if you're strategic about it, then you feel like you're driving, which is also really important. It's not just a job that happened to you and you're relying on your manager for progression. Be an active participant in it. And the Salesforce ecosystem has just ballooned, right? So whatever path you were on, it may not be the path you need to be on anymore. Like for me, I thought I'd become a developer. I don't need to be a developer in order to have that balance of being able to not have so many meetings and not have to travel anymore. There were other ways to accomplish that, and I think for me too, I tried to listen to a lot of webinars that would be hosted by people in the Salesforce ecosystem to hear about what they did. Like I didn't know what product management was, and I didn't know what technical architecture was, right? Or DevOps. You have to learn about it and then go, okay. And if they take questions like me, ask them like, hey, how's your work-life balance, right? Or what are the ups and downs? Because for me, just knowing that's what I wanted, when I watch a cool presentation, I can say, that's so cool. That person gets to travel the world and do those demos, and I can appreciate it, but there's no envy because I know I don't want to travel the world for work, right? And so when you're really clear on what you want, you also have that kind of compass to navigate you to know what's cool and what you want to learn, but also be able to say, that's cool, that's on the backlog. I may never get to that, and that's okay because I'm focused on what matters to move the needle for me.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, whatever works for you, for an individual. So, Maria, we briefly touched upon how would a solution architect strategize a typical project from beginning to end. And now that we have discussed that briefly, what are the skill sets that one needs to become a solution architect, as in technical skills and non-technical skills?
Cool. That's a great question. And I think I saw a question too in here about what certifications do you
Yes.
recommend? So I personally would recommend so core would be sales, service, and community, just so that you know how that core part of the platform operates with itself. Um, and then I would recommend going for the application architect. And the big ones on application architect are sharing. That would be the first one you do, I would recommend, because if you don't know sharing well, it's very easy for your design to not work as you expect. A lot of people just assume sharing will work. The first thing I do when I go into an org, I should not, first thing I do is go look at how many flows and process builders are there. Okay. And the next thing I do is I go look at the sharing rules and I look at the setting and see, okay, are we public? Are we private? Does this company, like, is it organized? You'll know when you go in there and take a look at what's going on. And I'd say any beautiful, elegant object level design can fail with complex sharing requirements. So take a look at that. There's also high data volumes as part of the application architecture. I thought that that was very eye-opening. I did a lot of data loads at my in my last role, but it really helped me understand more about like how the technical nitty-gritty of those things work and impact, like especially when it comes to SKU and things like that. Just learning, okay, if I'm going to try to do this, let me try to downplay the impact on my system and my users by changing some certain things. So platform developer one, I think it's called developer one, is I think it's still a requirement for this. I just say study, do the trail. You don't have to actually code anything for it. So if you have had your way around Salesforce as a senior consultant, you'll be able to do it. Like worst case, what I did, I'm a visual thinker, is there were a couple of pieces of syntax that I just wrote down and looked at so that if I had a question with syntax, I would know which one looked right versus which one looks wrong. You know, like, is it find or is it search? I think there might have been one or two questions like that, but the bulk of that exam still leverages your knowledge of the platform and architecture. So even if you're not a coder, I'm not a coder. That one was one of the hardest for me, I'd say. But you know, that's there. Now on the technical architect side, I would say do what is interesting to you because you don't have to go that route. For me, the integration architecture was really interesting. Like I said, I'm interested in MuleSoft. Part of it is I wanted to be able to know if I saw a design that was produced by somebody, like if I could like sniff test it, you know, like I can kind of sniff test Apex. Like I don't look for any business logic in a trigger. If it's there, I'm going to say, go put it in a class. I don't need to know code to say that. Right. And so I did the integration architecture one. That was my most recent exam that I passed. And honestly, I think I might be done with certs for a while now. I think I have what I need. Like I've told y'all, I've pivoted my focus to management. I don't need to get more technical skills. I need to start working on those management skills and those exercises. And so I would say do what you need to do to get you where your goals take you. I would recommend core plus the application architect if you want to feel confident if you were placed in a solution architect role and you might be the solo architect, that you could make good choices. If you're not, there's a real, I mean, all of us have been there. I've been there where I designed something that kind of wasn't so great or didn't scale well. You'll have to face that, but it's different when you face it as an architect as opposed to the solo admin where nobody's going to give you too much flack for not knowing what you weren't expected to know. So that would be what I recommend on the architecture path. And then from so those are the hard skills. The soft skills are, first of all, I would say you got to hone your communication skill down, verbal and written, now that we're in an async world where a lot of stuff happens offline. For me, I talk somewhat fast, so I do try to space myself, and I even have notes for this presentation to keep me on focus because I could go off on any number of tangents. But have your stuff focused. What I like to do is I have all my key points written down somewhere because there are people whose learning style is such that it is difficult for them to hear, but and it's better for them to see, right, and go with that. So I'll write it down, even if it's just a list of things, and then depending on how your team works. For me, I'll usually put it on a page like SharePoint or whatever is their document repository, right? Or Google Drive, whatever it is. Then I will use email to send a reminder. And I also use, if there's Slack or something, I'll reference that the material is there, but I'm always pointing to the page. And I like it when the documentation page supports commenting, whether it's Google Drive or, you know, Confluence or whatever, because I always want to position it with, here's my plan, here's what I've developed. If you have feedback, tell me. And I encourage, tell me offline. We can set up a meeting just to talk through it. Or my second skill I will pose to you is thick skin. Be prepared to show up and say, this is what I've got. This is what I know. What else do we have? And be prepared to have it torn apart if it's not good. But that's a growing lesson, right? And you're there for a reason. And so one thing Salesforce does that I think we need more of is admitting we don't have to know everything. So ask questions. And if you don't know, this is a pretty common thing, but say, I don't know, I'll find out. Or, hey, I didn't know that was a limitation. Thanks for sharing. I'm so glad we figured this out before we went into build, so be open to thick skin, be open to presenting and figuring out something's wrong. Those are all things you can work with. Okay. The next skill is empathy to others, because you're bringing in people who are not Salesforce experts, specifically say your business owners, right? For them, they know their business really well, but are they going to look at your design doc and say, yeah, that sharing configuration is going to meet my requirements? No, they're not. You're going to need to break it down for them and say, this means your sales user is going to be able to see these accounts. They won't be able to see any contacts if they can't see these accounts, right? Whatever you're trying to explain. And I just try to always remember, like, every person is valuable, like, irrespective of what they bring to the table. Every person is valuable. So just remember that. I have to remember that for myself too. I'm sure sometimes, but treat everybody's feedback as if there's something of value. And if I'm not sure where someone's going, I'll try to say, hey, can I get offline so we can spend some time really understanding? I can really listen to what you want. That's the biggest thing for me, is give them the time and the attention, but also, don't let it railroad a meeting. So just find that place where you can be respectful and acknowledge those concerns and treat them, but also stay on track as well. And then we talked about technical knowledge, but in addition to those, like, to get those certs, Trailhead's really good. There's so many videos online now that show how people do things. I feel like I could probably spend an entire vacation just watching videos of people doing stuff. There's like FlowFest now, Automation Hour, several blogs. If you just Google like Salesforce blog, I'm sure like Salesforce Ben will come up, Automation Champion. Those are all things you can use to just stay up to date on your skilling, The one area that I like the least that I would still recommend you do a little bit is understanding for your businesses that you work with. So sales, support, marketing, customer experience, like, what are typical things they do and typical requirements for them, so that if you get requirements that are what I call off the ranch, you kind of can identify, like, yeah, I can design this for you. I can design anything, but this one seems a little strange or a little custom, right? And you can figure that out by learning about or participating in conferences that are business specific. So like, there's support conferences, there's customer experience conferences. Go look at our competitors. Like, go look and see what ServiceNow does when they do support and case management. Go see what Zendesk does. If they're asking for something custom and you're like, well, honestly, Salesforce and Zendesk and ServiceNow don't do that. So it's probably, you can tell yourself that's probably not a common ask that we do, right? It's just something to think about, because I think that's where I've run amok the worst. Is I've built this awesome design for something, but the business probably asked for something that shouldn't have been prioritized. I'll put it that way. And they thought it was going to move the needle, and it didn't. And we're not expected to know as architects, but I think you can offer a lot of value there if you feel supported, and you can say, I don't see the business value here, and we can build this, but here's all the other items that aren't going to get done if we focus on this. Do you have metrics? Do you have some way to demonstrate to us that what you're asking for is going to produce the desired results? Okay. So that's kind of a tough conversation to have, but that's where I start to see someone going, again, above being a senior consultant and getting into that solution architecture lane.
Okay. I mean, very well explained, the way you have kind of bifurcated technical and non-technical skills, and how you can clear the certifications. I think it's very important to understand, like you said, the nitty-gritties of the subject, and you need to know the fundamentals, the very core of the domain which you are into. And apart from that, like you said, soft skills like communication skills, written and verbal verbal and organizational skills. These are very important skills. So very well explained. And like you said, there are so many resources available, like blogs and videos and Trailhead, and there are so many communities online. There's a whole Twitter community and Trailhead community. Even we at Affians, we write so many blogs explaining various concepts. So I'm sure you have a lot of resources out there, and thank you for pointing that out, Maria. And so, like, once a person got the certification, got some hands on, got the fundamentals clear, uh, now is the step of doing the actual work. So when a person like prepared completely, now the it is time to go for interviews. So how does one prepare for an interview, and what kind of questions are generally asked? And I want to know, like, because we had posted the live, I mean the event, in a group, and we got a question like, what are some tips that you want to share, because you are working with Salesforce. So when you had your interview, how was it like? What was the process like? And if you can share some tips on how to prepare for it.
Sure. Well, one cool thing that I didn't know about Salesforce until I was in the interview process is there's actually a trailhead on the interview process at Salesforce. And so I
Oh,
will get that, and it's public. It's a public link. So I will look it up and I'll share it with you so you can share it. But
sure.
it walks through, like, here's what our interview process is like, here's what to expect, and kind of here's how it goes. And I thought that was very cool and very transparent. And part of it is Salesforce, it is super important to them that we do not kind of discriminate in our hiring processes, right? Equality is a core feature, and so they set the bar with, this is what we do, and we standardize it, and you know what I mean. It really helps make sure that people's experience is similar in that sense. High level though, I mean, I've interviewed for several roles and obviously went through the Salesforce process. I always see multiple verbal interviews, at least one's just a culture check, like, don't be a jerk, are you nice? That kind of thing. So your verbal communication will come off really well there. And then also, I would say, like, try to relax, like, the way I see it is, if you feel like you need to be overly formal and that's what you need for your employer and that's not who you are, do you really want a job where you're not going to be able to be who you are? So be comfortable with who you are and make sure that they see who you are. Because if they don't value you, it's not a good fit for you, let alone that, who cares what they think? They're not a good fit for you. So I'd say be prepared to talk about yourself, talk about your accomplishments. One thing that I did, especially because, consulting is kind of a whirlwind, is I had always kept a list of how many projects I did, kind of what clouds I did. But I went in and said, okay, what did I actually do? So that I had this list of stuff. And I remembered, like, some stuff that felt really stupid at the time didn't feel so bad anymore. And, in some projects I was like, oh, that was actually really smart now that I look at it this far away, right? And so have that list top of mind so you can drop these little pieces of things that you've done naturally in a conversation without needing to, like, present a resume. So be prepared. You'll probably talk to somebody who's more like in a leadership role, like a manager or something like that first. Then you'll have a technical, what I say is like a technical verbal. And then some roles, a lot of roles that for me especially, I've learned my lesson. I will never not do a technical interview. And so what that means is you have to have an org, so a developer org. Typically you wouldn't want to use the sandbox for this, and I'm going to, at the time of the interview, present you with some kind of prompt, and I'm going to expect to see you do something, like build something in the org and ask questions. That might be more towards solution, or excuse me, more consultant or configurer, if you will, admin, than SA. But for me, I'll just say there's a lot of people who can talk the talk but can't actually deliver. So if you're in a delivery role, I've just found it's really important to see how people deliver, just to get an understanding, especially if you're going to be in a role where you're billing a client. Your time matters. You need to be efficient. So if I see someone, like, Googling how to get to the account page that tells me you don't know how to get to the account page. That's not good. So be prepared for that. But again, be prepared to talk about yourself. come with a list of questions to ask them. That's pretty much standard in any industry these days. Mine tend to be around work-life balance. So why do you like working here? What's your favorite thing to do? Where do you see yourself going? I like to hear answers to why are you here, right? Like, and it can be good sometimes because sometimes someone's on their way out, and so you see that hesitation. And if there's a lot of people leaving, what's up? That's one thing I would say too in preparing for an interview is this saved me big time recently. But look for people on LinkedIn who work at the company, and look for people who used to work at the company, and see if they'll reach out to you and talk to you about their experiences there. Because for me, it's great. I mean, Salesforce, it's still going to depend on your team, right? How you experience culture, but there's still things that are generally true, and you want to make sure it's a good fit because a career change is a big choice. So prepare yourself to market the best version of yourself. Be yourself, okay? And then be prepared to ask questions, because I think how I've heard it is you're interviewing them. Make sure they're a good fit for you too.
Yes, that's very true. I mean, tables have turned around now. I mean, we got to make sure we are working with the right company and the right organization and the right culture.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, thank you for that. It was very well put, and some really good thoughts to ponder upon. Um, like, just be yourself and just, do you.
Yes.
And just be confident. Research a lot about the company, about the company culture, network, ask people, and just know your fundamentals.
Yes,
That's the thing.
exactly.
Yes. So, that was it from my end. So, thank you so much for such an insightful conversation. I'm sure audiences will take home a lot of important information and will implement henceforth. So, a little something that I want to tell about ourselves is we are FENs, a registered Salesforce partner, and we work with some really noteworthy clients globally. We also we are, because we are expanding, we keep on hiring new talents. So if you are somebody who wants to work with us, please send in your applications through our website portal, or you can drop us an email at careers@fens.com. So Maria, because we had announced that we are hosting live and you are going to be talking to us, we received a few questions for
Okay.
you in the group chat. So I would want to ask you a few questions. I'm sure you have covered most of them, but there's a scenario that I want to share. Okay. So Anna Green is asking that I have 2 years of experience in the Salesforce domain and recently got my solution architect certification. Can I get a job as a solution architect, or do I need more experience, like more hands-on?
Okay, really quick, is the solution architect certification the application architect certification? If you can answer, let us know. But I'd say like 2 years of experience can vary greatly. 2 years at a company with 100 users, 10 years at a company with 100 users is nothing compared to 2 years as a partner where you're doing multiple projects, right? I would say go for them. You have the certification knowledge, okay? When you're going for the roles, be transparent about your experience. Anyone who looks at your resume is going to see she's been working in Salesforce for 2 years, right? And then when you talk about your experience and your strengths, be real about them, but get an understanding from the client, like, what will my role be? And you can also gut check, am I going to be a good fit? You can ask to speak to people on your team to see if you're going to be a good fit. One of the roles I looked at was it was a solution architect role. But then when I got to the interview, I found out one of the expectations was managing a team of 3 people, including what it looked like 2 underperformers. And like I told you earlier, I was like, I don't want to manage, and it sounds like I might have to fire 2 people, and I'm definitely not signing up for that. So just make sure, like that what you're applying for works. If it's a smaller company or a startup company that's needing to grow quickly, you're going to grow with them. If there's a big team, if they already have other architects, you'll learn from them. So you won't be alone. So that experience doesn't matter. The 2 years, the quality of that experience matters. But at where the market is right now, if you have the knowledge, just make sure that you have resources. you can turn to if you get stuck, okay? Whether it's on your team as employers or a mentor in the space that can help you so that you're delivering good stuff so you can go to bed with a good conscience at the end of the day. But I'd say if you've done your work and you understand those concepts, you're ready to start looking for those roles.
Wonderful. So yeah, I mean, she already has like 2 years under her belt, certification. So you're good to go, Anna. You can definitely take that leap. Last question, because I know that we had committed 1 hour, and you might be running late. So okay, we have covered mostly, but yes, this is an interesting one. Rachel is asking, how can one pivot from non-technical background to pursuing solution architect? I mean, you've already covered it, but what would you want to say?
Yeah, my top recommendation is going to be I'm going to advertise for somebody. It's a company called Talent Stacker. I don't know if y'all have heard of it, but I've just seen them recently, like in the last year. They're crushing it. They are just taking people who want to get into the industry, figure out what they want to do, and crush it. And they're taking people with non-traditional backgrounds left and right. They have some variant of a free program and then a paid program. But just, I mean, follow their leader on LinkedIn. He's posting regularly, like, this person just got a 6-figure job. And not everybody will. It'll depend on what your non-technical background is. Say it's management or business leadership, you'll be able to apply those skills to your Salesforce role, right? But I mean, it's insane. They had a married couple the other day where both the people left their previous roles and got into Salesforce roles within weeks of each other. The market is so hot right now. I think what I like about this company is they're really focused on getting you the skills you need to get that job. And I think it would be so easy to try to do Trailhead forever or get certifications forever. That may not be what employers want, right? And so this company has done a really good job of putting the right pieces together and the networking together, where I think you could get some good advice and a good strategy for making that pivot.
Oh wow, that's wonderful. Talents
Talent
Slacker.
Stacker, yeah. And I
Talent
can
Slacker.
send that to you along with the
Sure,
link for the Salesforce interviews.
sure. I will post it, post the live. So thank you for that. Okay, I think that's it for today. We have covered almost everything surrounding solution architect and work-life balance and the technicalities and the non-technicalities and interviews and everything. Thank you so much, Maria, for taking time from your busy schedule and talking to us. We are extremely grateful to have you today. It was truly a wonderful experience and a supercharged and a fun experience for me. And I'm sure it was for our audiences as well. Our next session is on Salesforce marketing automation tools with Daniel Reeve, which is taking place on next week, Friday, 29th April. Do not forget to tune in. Also, to know more about our upcoming events, follow us on all our social media platforms and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please follow Maria on her LinkedIn and Twitter to know more about all the interesting information she put out. We look forward to seeing you next time with brand new episode. Till then, stay tuned and have an exciting weekend. Maria, thank you so much. And to all our audiences who joined us today, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Best wishes in your journey.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Maria.